Hey guys, what is up? Welcome back to the Embrace Nerd Show. We got a lot of really fun topics, but this is the second time I'm filming this video because the first time there was a weird echo, and I think it was due to me doing some of the reactions I was doing. And I personally feel like you guys deserve better quality, and so I am doing this again to make sure that I stay committed, that this show comes out on time, like the time I have it set to be committed to come out to. So if I look a little tired, it's because I'm filming this quite late at night, and it is, for me, 1:21 in the morning. So, I apologize if I seem a little tired, but I want to make sure this is to y'all in the best quality. And sadly, when I was looking at the video, when I was editing it, it was echoey and it didn't sound right, and I'm gonna try to figure out what that issue is. But without further ado, we got a lot of really fun topics to talk about. We got the Super Bowl trailers, which ones were the best, which ones spoke to me the most, what happened with Superman, like what was going on with all that. Did that win us over? Was that the right smart choice to make? We got some TV drama with the Bo DeMeo stuff. I did a really long video on that. For better or worse, it was about an hour and a half long, me just reacting and commentating on the video that he released. But this is going to be a more smaller, more concise, just personal thoughts and kind of overseeing the context that's been given as of yet, and kind of who do I side with? Do I kind of agree with Marvel, or do I agree with someone like Bo DeMeo? Then we're going to talk a little bit about video games. We got a fun story about the Switch, and then we have some more drama, talking about some of the things that I talked about this past weekend, dealing with Warner Brothers games, and what can they do to fix it? And that'll be the big question of this video. And then we're going to end it off with comics. I haven't had a quick chance to read even more comics to do any reviews, but I have a question, one to you, the audience, about what you guys collect, and then how do we save the comic books that we love? How do we save this form of storytelling in America for us? And so, anyway, I think this is going to be a really fun show, and without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, guys, let's talk about the big thing. The big game happened this weekend. I hope you guys got to watch it. I was at work, so sadly I missed out on the opportunity. I caught up on a couple things, like the Kendrick Lamar halftime show was, in my opinion, phenomenal. I thought it was really, really good. And I enjoyed the TV spots, and the short amount of trailers that we actually got, but we didn't get many. And so the question is, what trailer do I think won the Super Bowl? Which one won me over, and which one do I think won overall? And there was a lot of really good ones, and ones that surprised me. We're probably not going to talk about this one too much on this channel, but I thought F1 was really good. I thought it was definitely a movie, when you see the trailer, you're like, yeah, you got to see that in theaters. That's like a guarantee. You have to see this movie in theaters. But and then there was a lot of fun ones, and something like Lilo and Stitch. Like, Stitch will always have my heart forever. He is, like, probably my go-to favorite Disney character, especially as a kid. I loved Stitch as a kid. But my favorite trailer, and it was really the only true trailer out of all of them, really, was Thunderbolts. I thought Thunderbolts really surprised me. I thought the first trailer was just fine. It was okay. And there was things that were annoying me from Marvel's past that just kind of made me not very happy. Like, for example, having the female Taskmaster as a character just seemed like a waste to me, and it was just really disappointing to even have that character still around for Marvel personally. I'm not a fan. Just, fan, the actress is fine or whatever, just not a fan of that character, the way they've handled Taskmaster in the movies. But, I just thought the original trailer was just okay. It was just okay, in my opinion. This one, I thought, was really good. Really, really good. You can check my reaction. It's up on YouTube right now. But I thought it was phenomenal. I was super, super happy with it. And it's probably what won me over. Now, here's the thing. What do I think actually won the audiences over? I think F1 definitely is going to be the people that aren't like super nerdy. You know, F1 definitely was it for them. But I'm not going to lie. I thought the Stitch TV spot, even though it has nothing to do with the movie, gave the essence of who Stitch was, and I think that's going to win over a lot of people. It was just such a fun little spot that I think a lot of people are going to be really excited about it, and I think that's what's going to really win a lot of people to go to the movies. But what about you guys? What do you think? Was there something that you were missing that you thought should have been there? Superman? You know, was there something else you wish you would have saw instead? Let me know in the comments down below. Speaking of things that we should have had in the trailer, let's talk about Superman. We didn't really get too much. We got a lot of cool little animations of Krypto, you know, specifically kind of getting to see him fly around. You know, they were using him as kind of the marketing ploy for the Puppy Bowl. And so we saw that. We saw the nice video that James Gunn came out with, you know, talking about his dog and kind of advertising the Puppy Bowl and giving appreciation to Krypto in the Superman movie and using it as a way to clearly to advertise the movie. And I thought that was really fun, inventive, and interesting, especially when we know that Warner Brothers probably can't be spending a lot of money right now. Now, I do think they made it, if Warner Brothers could only put out one movie as a trailer for the Super Bowl, it makes sense they picked F1. I think F1 was the better choice to make for the audience they were viewing it to. And I don't know if it was best for Superman to compete with that, but I do think they should have gave us a little bit more than what they gave us. Namely because having the Krypto thing was fine, but also having something like Guy Gardner popping up and making the weird bowl pun about his bowl cut, it was fine. It was funny to me. I got a laugh out of it. But I do think a lot of normal people are going to find that odd if you don't give us a reason to love the character. They don't know why they should love Guy Gardner. They have no idea who Guy Gardner is. And if you don't know who Guy Gardner is, then maybe showing off him in that kind of way was probably an odd thing to do personally. That's kind of how I felt. I didn't know if it was earned. I don't know if that silliness and that pun was earned for the normal audience. And I definitely saw some people trashing it online. I thought it was fine. I thought it was funny enough. But it did seem odd, and it doesn't feel earned because you didn't give us anything really new to really check out. Besides a couple of posters of Krypto, which all looked really good, it was much to be desired, I felt like. And there was and maybe they don't want to show clips. And that was something I thought about too. I was like, why did they not just show us a clip of the film? But it's like, you haven't even shown your true trailer. You've shown a teaser trailer. We're probably not even going to get another trailer for the movie till CinemaCon. And so releasing a clip right now of the movie is probably too soon. It's probably too soon. We're probably going to be seeing clips of the movie, I'm guessing, May, June, July is when we're going to be seeing the clips if we see the next trailer in April. But I know there was that leaked footage of when they were filming a scene with Mr. Terrific, and it was clearly something to do with Krypto. Clearly had something to do with Krypto, and he's kind of like leading him, but also kind of running away from him. And, you know, I kind of wish they would have shown that scene. You know, I kind of wish they would have showed that, but maybe that gives too much of a spoiler away. I don't know. But I do feel like we should have had maybe something to help compete against everything else we saw. But maybe that's just me being really thirsty for DC content. I think the Krypto thing was actually fine, but maybe the Guy Gardner stuff, maybe it wasn't the right place. But then again, when are you going to have a chance to have a Super Bowl pun, with Guy Gardner. I don't know. I don't know when you're going to have that opportunity again. But what about you guys? Do you think that the Superman stuff was kind of a disappointment? Do you think that DC should have had something out there to compete against Thunderbolts? Or do you think that Warner Brothers made the right decision by deciding not to really show us really anything new with Superman, but just stick with the Puppy Bowl advertisement, show us the TV spot they already had before, and, use that big time money to push this F1 movie that would reach, a different audience that maybe isn't into all the nerdy stuff, because all Warner Brothers movies have to do really, really good right now, because as we're going to get into later, Warner Brothers is definitely hurting. But anyway, guys, let me know what you thought down below. Okay. Now, that is it for the movie news. Now we're going to get into the show news. And what better show news to talk about than a little bit of drama from Marvel dealing with the showrunner of X-Men 97, Beau DeMayo. Now, if you want to watch, which, if you're one of the 20-something people that watch that video, God bless you. I came straight to work and decided, I'm just going to react to this. And instead of doing it live, which maybe I should have just done it live, I filmed myself reacting to it and I posted it online. So if you watched all that, like I said, I salute you. That was quite long and I almost apologize for that. But I really had a lot to express and really wanted to hear out everything that he said. And so that's what I want to do right now, is give a more concise version of my thoughts dealing with his situation and maybe asking a broader question about who works at Marvel and are these some of the right people to have at Marvel and to have at any of these things dealing with the things that we love. Let me get a drink of water real quick. Sorry guys, this is like the second time I'm filming this video and it's quite long, so forgive me. I apologize for the water drinking. But as we know, Beau DeMayo and the team that worked on X-Men 97 brought us something that was fantastic. It was amazing. It gave me hope for Marvel again. I had started to become apathetic, to be honest with you, with some of the things and the choices that Marvel was making within their movies and their shows, and really Disney in general was starting to earn my apathy for the many things they have been doing. And X-Men 97 came out, and I gave it a chance. It was the first time I resubscribed to Disney Plus in quite a long time, and I gave it a shot. And I was so happy I did, because I thought that it was incredible. And, beside the fact that maybe me and Beau DeMayo probably have things we may disagree on, I thought that the story he was telling, the pitch he made, was fantastic. And I thought that he stayed true to the characters that we love. And it really felt like he chose story first over anything. His personal beliefs over a lot of stuff, which was really a breath of fresh air, because Marvel seemed to not really be doing that. And a lot of things were said about Beau. A lot of negative things were said about him. And some things, were obvious because you could see it on his Twitter, but then some things were things about his behavior. About him being a really hard person to work with, about him sending inappropriate pictures to coworkers, and you kind of wondered what was true. And Beau has really kind of stayed true to his innocence, but he hasn't talked too much about it, probably because of legal reasons, and now finally he did. Friday he released his video. It was about 30 minutes long, and he kind of gave a legal statement, really, about some of the issues that he had at Marvel with what he could say, and to share his innocence, and really to, share what he felt was, racism and homophobia that he was dealing with at Marvel, but also it sounds like nerd phobia, because it seemed like he was getting hit from all angles. He was getting hit from what he is claiming. Okay, and let me stress that too. From what he is claiming, because the reality is we don't know. We don't know. And even though I think he did a phenomenal job on X-Men 97, the reality is I don't know what the truth is. But I do know that he is very persistent with his innocence. And he's willing to go this route to do this. Now, you can argue that all he's doing is trying to save his job. Trying to have an opportunity to tell stories again. Which clearly you can tell he's very passionate about and something that he really desires to do again. But at the same time, I think you wouldn't go through this if you knew that they had something on you that would show that their claims were true. And you wouldn't be this persistent about trying to prove your innocence if Marvel could just quickly share something that would take that away. Or you would risk getting sued into oblivion, right? So, it leads me to believe that there's something deeper there, that maybe, maybe he's not fully innocent, maybe mistakes were made on his part, but it's not as black and white as we've seen for sure, or what we've been told before. It's not as black and white as that, and maybe even there's some things where he is actually very innocent, and maybe there was bad behavior presented to him on the other side. Now, let me get this out of the way. This isn't a political show, but at the same time, I'm not going to waver necessarily, not just on my beliefs, and I would never expect him to do the same thing. I don't believe in shoving those things down your throats constantly, but I do think when it comes into our culture, when it comes into the nerd culture that we love, it doesn't need to be ignored. And it's going to be addressed here, and it'll be addressed a little bit later with the video game story we have to cover. But, for example, there was one statement he made that I did push back on a little bit, about how he was saying that, he was saying different things that weren't right. And a lot of the things he said, if they were true, they definitely are not right. But one of the things he was saying dealt with someone saying that he's basically accusing that person making white-splaining. So explaining things, I guess, with that white perspective, or going out of their way to explain it to someone who's not white about how things are done or how whatever. And supposedly the argument back from that person was that it had nothing to do with them being white. And I know there's the view with critical race theory, with the idea of white fragility, that basically deep down, we all have, specifically white people, have this critical race bias that we carry within us at all times. And that was the one thing that he said that really kind of caused me pause, because that's not something that I would necessarily agree with. That inherently, no matter what, white people are always racist. That's not something I would inherently agree with at all. But at the same time, he has to set up his legal argument to explain why people had done him wrong. He has to set up his civil rights claims. And so he has to present things probably in those lenses. But sometimes people are just jerks. And a lot of times when people are just jerks, it really has nothing to do with race. It just has to do with who they are as people. And if someone was condescending when explaining something to someone, it doesn't always have to always lean towards race. But I also asked when I did my reaction, what did he say? What did he say back to Bo? What was he saying to Bo? And those things we don't know. But I'm just trying to sharing this to show that I didn't always just agree with everything that Bo said. But I think Bo set up enough evidence to show that clearly things were happening that were inappropriate, that were done, and it seemed like he was getting hit, like I said, from all sides. It seems like he was getting hit in elements that maybe could have been racist. He was getting hit in elements that could have been inappropriate. And it seemed like when he tried to do the good right thing, from what he is saying and what he's claiming, is that, he got retaliated against for doing the right thing. It also sounds like a lot of people, maybe people that he would even agree with, found his nerdum to be a problem. Either his nerdum was a problem because it got away from what they wanted to do, or for who he wanted to represent in the story. He even said that someone had a legit problem with him using Scott Summers because, the quote of, it's like he's just another crappy white man. Why are you going to use another crappy white man to be the leader of the X-Men? It's like, because Cyclops is the leader of the X-Men, And there's other leaders in the X-Men, but, like, Cyclops is that guy. He is that guy. And so to take him away, Bo was like, no. Like, he needs to be the leader. And I really do appreciate him fighting for that. But, when you hear things like that, or you hear things like you're just trying to karaoke the comics, or you're just trying to be like, why are you wanting to go back to what these old white men have done? Mocking people like Chris Claremont or Stan Lee, who are literally the reason that these people have a job, by the way. The reason you get to work on X-Men is because of a bunch of old white dudes, right? So it seemed off. It seemed really off. And it leaves me with a question of, what kind of people are DC and Marvel hiring? And specifically Marvel with this issue, but like, I think that DC and Marvel need to be careful that they hire people that don't have to know everything about comics. They don't have to be these virtuosos and these super duper fans, but they need to have respect for the source material, and they need to be able to carry a lens of not just respect for each other, of course, because some of the issues that Bo was saying, sound legitimate and sound like legit problems, but need to have a perspective that would call back to the source material, that calls back to the things that make it great. Because it just needs to be reminded that the reason that X-Men 97 did as well as it did is the same reason that the original X-Men series did as well as it did, which is that it adapted the source material, and it adapted it in a very truthful way. And if more people adapted if more people adapted stories like this that I have, that Bo literally took a panel from this comic, which was such a reward to me. My wife freaked out, or my wife got to see me freak out when I, watched that scene for the first time, because it blew my mind. It absolutely blew my mind. And the fact that, that these people that work there want to do away with a lot of that and don't really want to do that. And there was that one line where Bo stopped them from doing like weird powers with Jubilee and her like shooting fireworks that would turn into middle fingers, but then having a problem with him having a, two characters in the second season have an interracial relationship between Bishop, who's black, and a white character. It just seemed odd. It seemed like a odd, like, it's like, so you want to push this super inappropriate thing that wouldn't be okay for kids, but then you have an issue with these two characters being in a relationship with each other. Now, we don't know the context of it. It would be weird if all of a sudden it was like Bishop and a kid, for example. That would be clearly inappropriate. But if these are both of age individuals, which I'm assuming they were, there's no reason not to believe they were, then, something's off. Something's off there. And it definitely seems like a layered problem. And the fact that, I don't know what his role was in Blade, the Blade movie that can't seem to come out and will never probably come out. But I'm very curious to know what his script was for Blade. to see if he had anything to do with, for example, there was the whole thing with Blade about how Blade, the movie, was basically this like feminist movie that barely had anything to do with Blade, and basically had to do with Blade's daughter and a couple other women. You know, that was the like script they were kind of running with. I don't think Beau DeMayo is the type of person that would have told, not saying he wouldn't tell a story like that or he'd be against telling a story like that, but I think he realizes that the movie should be about Blade. And whatever happens, you know, as long as he's truly innocent of, you know, some of the things they accused him of, I hope he's vindicated of that, and I hope that he does have future opportunities in the future, which is really what it comes down to. I may not agree with everything. I think there's some learning things, especially like, you know, the whole thing about the white-splaining thing. Like, you know, you should be able to have conversation with people, and I don't think he's someone who's afraid of conflict. I think that's more of setting up his legal arguments, but you should be able to, you know, everything can't be racial, I guess is what I'm saying. Like, you can't live your life like that. And that's just me personally. But if, you know, if you have a white coworker and he's telling you how you're wrong on something, that doesn't always mean that he's, you know, doing it in this like negative sense, right? You should have, and so that would be the one pushback I would give to him. But it seemed like a lot of things he shared and a lot of things that happened seemed to be very inappropriate and seemed to be things that shouldn't be happening in the workplace. And so I do hope those things get thoroughly investigated. I hope that if Beau is really an innocent person, like he seems to be someone who wouldn't be doing all this if he wasn't. I do hope more opportunities come to him in the future. And I guess the question that I leave with you guys is, what do you think should be done, you know, when it comes to the hiring process at Marvel? And, you know, is there a problem with hiring people who legitimately do not care about the source material? I would love to hear your thoughts down below. Okay, guys, let's get into the video games. We got to talk about Nintendo. Now, you know, Nintendo is something I haven't got to hit on too much like I would like to. But Nintendo, you know, they're coming out with the Nintendo 2. They're coming out with the Nintendo Direct in April. And somebody has shared what they think are, you know, shared the date with their audience. And it's no other than the creator of Super Smash Bros. Now, I'm only really showing this out of excitement, but coming with two questions. Are they going to come out with a new Smash Bros. Game for the Switch 2? Or are they doing something different? And, you know, if it's different, I think it'll be something we're not expecting. But if it's Smash Bros., I guess the question I have is, what in the world are you going to do to try to compete against Smash Bros. Ultimate? Because I really do believe that Smash Bros. Ultimate is the best Smash Bros. That they've ever made, period. I really do believe that. But I do have some concerns because, like, I don't know what you could do next. Like, what could you do to make that a better experience? I don't know, because to me it's perfect, and I don't see how you're going to be able to bring all those characters back to a brand new game. I don't know how you would. I mean, maybe you could afford it, but, like, it just seems like a lot. And so, really comes down to, you know, a question to you guys. You know, do you think we're going to get a Super Smash Bros. Game? Do we think we're going to get another one? You know, how do you feel about that? Do you feel like it's going to be a brand new game? What do you think that game could be? Let me know your thoughts down below, because we're definitely going to be getting something from the studio, because that game came out quite a long time ago, and I think they've had plenty of time to work on a new game, whatever that game is going to be. Maybe they're going to have opportunity to stretch their wings and do something different. I don't know. But no matter what, I definitely want your guys' opinion in the comments down below, what you guys think. Okay. Let's talk about the WB Games drama. I'm going to get a little sip of water so I don't start coughing like a crazy person. But once I do that, we're going to talk a little bit about Warner Brothers games. Okay, guys. So I released not just one long video. I released 2 long videos like a crazy person on Saturday. One dealt with the WB Games drama and everything revolving that, and the other one dealt with Bo DeMayo. The Bo DeMayo one was very long. Apologies for you guys. A thank you, but also apologies at the same time if you watch that very, very long video. But I had a lot to say, and he had a lot to say, and I wanted to respect his time, and I had a lot to say as well. So it just became a thing. It became a super long thing that I probably should have just done live. But instead, I was like, you know what? I'm going to record it and then post it, And I probably should have just reacted to it live. But anyway, lessons learned for sure. But the other story dealt with WB Games and some of the drama that we already knew was there, but we didn't realize how bad it was. Dealing with all their different studios. Now, if you want to see my full rant, it's there. You can watch it. It's long. It's 45 minutes, but it is there if you want to watch it. This is going to be my more concise thoughts. And it really comes down to this. It comes down to what is actually to blame. And I do agree with someone who commented on my video about it, where he said for him it did seem like bad business decisions. And that's really the truth of it. And he put a lot of blame on the live service aspect. And I do believe that the live service aspect has a huge part of it. I think that was a huge part of it. And I think it was the majority part of the issue when it came to specifically multiverses. But I think there's a deeper layer here that I kind of want to address. And I think the thing is, it all comes down to your business, but I think it's a more layered thing than most people are willing to talk about. Because it's not just the fact of pushing the live service. Now, I think, like I said, multiverses, I think carries that failure of multiverses is specifically only really truly about the live service aspect of the game and then how they handled the game in its entirety. The way they presented it with the beta aspect of it, the fact they took it away for a year and then brought it back and it just nosedived. The people playing the game just went way down. But I think, the live service aspect of it was definitely a fault because we should be having, honestly, the characters they released, everything they did, you could have done that as a DLC and treated it like a normal Smash Bros. Alternative, and I think we would have been getting a Multiversus 2. I think in years down the road we would eventually get a Multiversus 3. I think we would have gotten that from these publishers. I think we could have gotten future Multiversus games from them if they would have sold it and treated it like a normal game, but instead we're not going to get that. Instead, we're going to lose this franchise that could have lasted a lot longer, but is now dead because they wanted to turn their audience into cash cows forever and just milk us, milk cows, milk cash cows. And that's just not how people, not only not what they want, it's not how they operate, and it doesn't even matter how much people play the games. Not everybody wants to go and spend a bunch of money on costumes that you can't resell, you can't do nothing with, and maybe one day those things will get fixed. I have a buddy who's actually working on a video game right now. I'm quite proud of him. He's one of my best friends, and they are working on, a crypto blockchain where you can buy certain items to use in the game, and then if you want to, you could sell that to someone else. And maybe that will happen eventually, and maybe that's really live service maybe needs to get to that point before they actually turn into before live service can really thrive, besides maybe a few exceptions like Marvel Rivals or Fortnite, things like that. But it really doesn't seem to be working. And that is one element of it. And the leadership not communicating with their people, and just bad top leadership, which I want to get back to in a minute, because I do think there's a solution there. I think that is, carries probably about 90% of the weight of everything. Because I think any other issue that I'll bring up in a second, I think all revolves around that. All revolves around that leadership. The second thing I want to bring up, though, is the thing that's going to be a little less popular to admit, but I think it's just obvious. And I will disclude something like multiverses from this. But I do think there is fault from the developers as well. And it doesn't just come down to the fact of, all the things I totally have empathy for and understanding for, where everything was like constantly changing. So, like, for example, Montreal tries to work on something, and then all of a sudden, the higher ups totally changed their plans because the Flash movie didn't do well, or this thing doesn't feel right, and the people that are making the Wonder Woman game to just cancel what they were doing to try to reboot the Wonder Woman game because they're not happy with the way it looked, or to not allow them to work on something new, which I think is probably fair, but to constantly make changes and make them sit there and wait to know what to do, not only wastes time, it wastes so much money, and it's super inefficient. And those things do fall on the leadership. But the thing that doesn't fall on necessarily leadership completely is the choices that the developers made within their games themselves. And, maybe the leadership is the reason that we did get, instead of getting a Superman game, we got this live service milk cow of Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. But the developers and the writers of these games are the ones that decide what happened in the game. They're the ones that cause fans to have great disdain for the game. They're the ones that decided to put political messaging really, really hard into their game. They're the ones that decided to not use core Suicide Squad members after the main four, and instead of giving us really unique characters, gave us these really preachy, messagey characters that just didn't make sense to even have them in the game in the first place. Because who was asking for a bulky female version of Mr. Freeze? Not many people, I would assume. And those things killed the audience. The way that you handled the heroes killed the audience. Those core elements killed the audience of that game before the game even came out. When we saw how you handled Batman and the choices you made with Batman, that killed the audience for that game. Gotham Knight should have been way better than what it was, especially the years that we waited for Montreal to come out with a game. There's no reason that Gotham Knight should not have been better or equal to Arkham Knight. And it could have been. It could have been. And I actually appreciate a lot of the things in Gotham Knight. I don't think it was fully fleshed out, and I do think it's a bummer that we're not going to get that 1.5 version of the game, but the game should have already been the 1.5 version of the game. It should have been the best version of the game that we could have got. I think the messaging that they chose in that game made people less interested in the game. I think the gameplay actually had a lot of promise in that game specifically. It wasn't perfect. The frame rates, we should have been able to play that game at 60 frames per second on a PlayStation. I think that's fair to say. I think we should have been able to have that opportunity. But there should have been more dynamic character choices and character opportunities in the game, and they didn't give us that. And part of that is because they were so focused on that live service aspect, even though they said they were never intended to make this a live service game. We now know that that's not true, that they were planning to make this a live service game. But also, going out of your way, for example, I played this mission specifically as Robin, but it's the mission where you're fighting a lot of the Harley Quinn goons. And you are in this building, and I think it's like it might have been the hospital. I didn't think it was the hospital. Maybe it was the hospital. But you're in this building, and, you run into this thing you can pick up and read. And usually those things are supposed to be giving you, like, history of Gotham, things that give you hints of the Court of Owls, but instead it was this huge political diatribe that you had to read, and it was, getting into a lot of left-leaning messaging. And when you read the little slice of life stuff, there was a lot of stuff dealing with that. There was the choices that made Robin gay, which really takes away from your 30 years of history with Robin. And the reason I bring these things up is because I do think that those inherent choices that you make, not only are you choosing those things over making sure you're telling a really good superhero story, but you're missing out on opportunities that should be there in the game. For example, we should have had Spoiler, maybe not as a playable character, but Spoiler should have showed up for Robin. We should have had side missions that linked different characters to the characters that revolve around their comics and their personal stories that are outside of Batman. Those things should have happened in the game, and they didn't. The other thing that should have happened, and this directly revolves around the messaging that they push in the game, I don't know if they view, rich, wealthy people, in a good way. And when you have someone like Batman at the end, basically killing himself, sacrificing himself. The game's been out for a while, so if I'm spoiling the game, I apologize. But sacrificing himself and giving this, like, socialist kind of message at the end before he bites the dust. And the fact that, like, you kill him, but then you have the twist where he comes back to life, and then you kill him again, just seemed kind of wasted. Wasted potential. Instead of actually having Batman as a playable character at the end of the game, which I think would have been more of a reward for the audience. As, like, okay, now you can not just play as the different characters, but now you can play as Batman. That would have been a huge twist and a great surprise for fans of the Batman franchise. And honestly, I think there was something with the gameplay there that really was special that we could have seen in the future. I think, honestly, making a Teen Titans game maybe would have been a better approach than making the Gotham Knights game, personally, on self-reflection, because I think the mechanics of the gameplay, I think, was really unique, and I think people would have been less judgy about it if it would have been a different IP instead of being core Batman IP, where they thought that you were just going to directly copy and paste the Batman Arkham style fighting mechanics. But not to go away from my point, I think that the developers have fallen into the mistakes that were made in these games as well. And like I said, I think a lot of it deals with their political messaging and their preachiness that they wanted to force. I think it forces you to even look at story beats differently. Because can this person do this based off of them being a man or a woman, or, different sexual preferences that you have to have in the game to fill your quota of what you think and what you believe? Well, if you have to fill this quota and you decide to use Robin as the person you fill the quota with, well, that takes away certain story elements that you can use in the game. And I think all that's kind of disappointing, and it's not only has affected the games, but it actually came in and affected the comics afterwards, which leaves me with a grievance, because the Robins are my favorite characters, and I think Tim Drake is kind of a ruined character now. And it's partly not really has much with him even being gay now. It's like they don't know what to do with the character. So that's kind of my rant on that. I'm going to kind of leave it there because we have other stories we kind of have to cover. But this is my solution. And this is because, yes, it really does fall down on the leadership I do think there's other factors to it, including the fact of the putting messaging over story, putting the live service over gameplay. I think someone made an interesting point. It was like they made a point about how they were like, gaming company trying to get, seeking as much monetary value as possible. And they said, meet customer trying to seek best entertainment as possible. And I would say also add developer trying to push as much message as possible, meet, gamer, consumer who wants the best entertainment as possible. And I'm not saying you can't have messaging in your game. I think messaging is always in games and always in art, no matter what you do. But I would just say try to make sure in the future that your gameplay's first and your story's first, above any of your personal beliefs. And if something doesn't work, don't let your personal, and it doesn't, in order for it to work, it doesn't fit your narrative of how things should be, I would encourage you to take a step back and try to do something different. And I think that's fair to say. But what about you guys? Do you disagree with me? Do you think that really didn't have anything to do with it? I think it's hard to say that didn't have anything to do with it. The person that commented on my video even made a point about Concord, about how Concord also didn't do good. Well, Concord and Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League have something in common that's outside of the live service. And I'll just say this. The live service game that's doing really well right now is Marvel Rivals. And there's a clear difference between the character choices and the way that they're handling Marvel Rivals and the way that they're handling things like Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League and something like Concord. I do think Multiverse is outside of that, but I think there's a clear example of the current preachiness of game developers, same issues that we have in Hollywood as well, but I think there's a clear thing there to show that that's a core problem that needs to be changed and addressed in the future. Alright guys, on to the very last thing. I'm going to take a little quick last drink of water, and then we're going to talk about, one, how do we personally collect our comics, if those of us that actually do read comics, and what can we do to ensure that comic books survive. Alright guys, so people read comics in a lot of different ways, and we have a lot more competition than we used to. And there's always like the classic way, right? This is my X-Men issue 25, which I called back from my talking about Beau DeMayo, that this has a panel in it that comes straight, like there's something in the show that comes straight from a panel in this comic. If you haven't read this comic, I won't tease that, but if you've seen the show, you know. If you know, you know. I'll just say that. It deals with Magneto and Wolverine, so if you know, you know. But that's the classic way, right, that we would read comics. Maybe the old school way was the newspaper strips, which that wasn't the best format at the time. And so these things used to be at grocery stores, used to be at gas stations, used to be everywhere. And you could pick a comic up for a pretty decent price. It wasn't more expensive than going to a movie or anything like that. And you could go home and you could read a story and get something from it. Well, now we have adapted, of course, and we've done new ways of reading. And one of those ways is just the classic, digital, right? People read digital books, whatever. I personally, if I'm going to read digital, I try to read through a tablet because I don't personally like reading from my phone, right? Not a fan of reading from my phone. Other people, let's see where it is, because I redid this video, so I filmed everything all over again. Let's see. some people, get this out, some people like their big books. They like their big books. They like to get kind of expensive and get fancy books. This is a deluxe edition, right? But this price point wasn't terrible. It wasn't terrible. This was $50. But it's not necessarily maybe the best purchase price for people, but this might be my favorite way of reading now. I like this size. I think this size is the perfect size for me now. And this might be my favorite way to read now. But again, it's a little bit more expensive, a little bit more pricey, fancier, but that's not going to get your daily person, right? That's not going to necessarily save comics, but it is a way you can collect. I don't currently have an omnibus yet, okay? I don't currently have an omnibus, but there's things like a compendium, right? Which is it's basically like an omnibus, just not a hardcover. It's not as fancy, but this is a much better price point with a lot more to read. Now, you could buy this at the time. This was like $60 when it first came out. But you can find this now on Amazon for like $30-something, and it's a much better price point for the average consumer, and it gives you a lot. It gives you a lot. So if you do save up for this, it's a much better price than, what you usually would get. And then you get your shorter stories that are more collected stories. This is Last Ronin. I'm still reading it. I got a little ways to go. But, it's about a decent amount of issues. But this is like a hardcover. Again, it can be a little more expensive, whatever. That's not a word. But more expensive. But it's still an enjoyable way to read. And this is kind of similar to the deluxe editions for me. I like this size. And I like how it feels when I read. Now, the classic way that I like to read the most, outside of just reading a floppy, was just the old school trade paperback. Now, this usually contains about 6 issues, right, that you could read, and it was available for you, right? And so it was just like I said, about 6 to 7, maybe 5 to 7 issues of a comic that you could read, and to me, it always felt comfortable holding it in my hands. It's not as fancy, which is a bummer, but it's really easy to read, and it still keeps the size format of a comic. But these are harder, and you don't really see these very much at your Walmarts, at all your stores. And, shelf-wise, they don't really necessarily fit great on a shelf either all the time. And so, they just never really made it out into the marketplace in a deeper way than your classic comic book stores. And they could be a little bit more expensive sometimes. This one was $17.99. Now, you could get this for pretty cheap on Amazon now. But just finding something at Amazon or your local comic book store isn't always what's going to help us keep these things alive. We got to get these back to readers. You gotta get these back to kids, honestly, and you're not going to be able to do that if you can't get these into stores. And so I don't know if this one is the perfect one to help comic books survive in a deeper way. But my conclusion, and the thing that I think is what they're doing, and I do think this is the future, at least of physical reading, I do think this is the future, is this. I apologize, is your DC Compact. I do think that this is the future for not just DC, but Marvel. And I think that this should maybe even take precedent. And this is going to be the thing that's going to make people upset, but I think this maybe should take precedent over selling things like that. And I do think that we should look at a selling model similar to the Rippaverse. I think, honestly, Marvel and DC should seriously look at a selling model like that. That instead of selling these books one floppy at a time until you can get a collection and then sell again, I think that we should start to try to transfer over to a more, not crowdfunding model, but a pre-order model, the way you can still pre-order now, but pre-ordering based off these collected stories. And then eventually, the goal should be, especially if the stories are good enough, to make them DC Compact or make them the, what are they calling the Marvel ones? I think they're calling them Marvel Premieres. Make those books, get them into people's hands in stores the way that it should be. It needs to be in Walmarts. It needs to be in Targets. Shoot, it needs to be in Dollar Generals, guys. These books need to be places where people can have access to them and be able to buy them. And ironically enough, I did find my Watchmen at Target, but it took a lot of looking to find, and they don't sell. When you go to Target again, you're not going to find, at least for me, you're not finding these at Target. At least in my Target, you're not finding these. And when you go to your Barnes & Noble, they're so hard to find. You really have to look. You really have to look. They're like hidden amongst all the other hardcovers and trade paperbacks. It should be easily available for them. And these should be, if they're not going to be at Dollar Generals, maybe that's too far. Because at the moment, because comics have gotten so far away from the modern audience. But I do believe that these should be at every Walmart. These should be at every Walmart. We have all the mangas and the Korean versions of a manga that are in a book form. We have Solo Leveling, multiple chapters, multiple volumes of Solo Leveling at my local Walmart. But I can't get a DC book at my local Walmart. That has to change. We got to do better. Or if not, eventually the market's going to age out. We're going to age out of the American mythology that we have, worked so hard to curate over multiple generations are going to be lost because people do not have access to these stories. And that's a real shame. That's a really, really real shame. And the only other alternative that I have that could work to reach new audiences is you would have to give up the physical model completely almost and, sell, just continue doing the hardcovers, continue doing the ones for the deep lore fans who really want the physical material. But you would almost have to just go away from even having Marvel Unlimited and Disney Infinite and go to a model where you're actually putting some of these stories on Max and on Disney Plus, where fans can literally, you like watching the shows, you like watching the cartoons, well, guess what? You can check out the comic on the streaming service right now, because the reality is all those comics would probably, the cost of making all those comics, probably, to be honest with you, probably covers the cost of a streaming show, honestly. And I think that is the best way to lower the price for the consumer. Because there's no way that people should be paying the amount they pay for comics every month when they pay way less for a streaming service that probably gives them way more content. It's just kind of crazy, and things definitely need to change. I personally want this to be the change over this. If I had to choose between the two, I love my thicker books. Those are purchases that I get to make as an adult. But trying to reach new audiences, we have to do something different. I'd rather it be this than this. But anyway, guys, what about you? How do you collect? Do you read? How do you read? Let me know in the comments down below what you think about that. And what are your suggestions? What do you think we could do to help make comic books survive another day? But anyway, guys, I really do appreciate all the time you have spent with me. If you've lasted this long, just remember this is going to be coming out every day during the week, Monday through Friday. In the mornings, you're going to have an Embrace Nerd show just for you. But anyway, guys, with that said, whatever you're doing, wherever you're going, I hope you're having a good one. Peace.